If you've watched any of our other training courses, you know how much emphasis we place on thorough and systematic organization. Trailers require the same effort in this area, but the methods used are quite a bit different from a typical long-form editing project. You need to know the movie inside and out before you can effectively plan how to market it. The goal is to have connections start happening in your brain for ways that seemingly disparate parts of the film can be rearranged, combined, and juxtaposed to create the most effective trailer. That only starts to happen once you've become intimately familiar with all the key dialogue lines and shots. Let's take a look at the organization process for two different types of people: editors and non-editors. If you're a non-editor, such as a producer, director, or filmmaker, you'll be helping to plan or oversee the trailer, but won't be doing the actual cutting. As such, you won't need to worry about organizing the visuals and audio in the editing program. But there are still some things you can do. Watch the feature or short film, and as you do so, take notes of key dialogue lines, key visuals, and key moments that are exciting, funny, scary, emotionally powerful, or just help to clearly tell the story. These will be all the key ingredients in developing a structure for the trailer and determining the best way to position the film for your audience. If you're the editor on the trailer, you've got a bit more work ahead of you. First, of course, watch the film. Try to view it fresh, as an audience member might be seeing it. Next, you're going to need to create an extremely thorough and granular breakdown of all the dialogue and key visuals to fully prepare for cutting a trailer. Starting with the dialogue, you'll need to subclip or otherwise mark each line from the feature. Label the line starting with the character's name, followed by the line that they deliver, like this. The goal is to have every single line in the film typed out and searchable using a text find function. You'll use this breakdown for a number of things. First, you'll use it to find lines in the film that tell the story clearly. This will sometimes require taking two lines that exist in very different areas of the feature, like these two.
You're the same as me, only better. Don't tell yourself.
And combining them into a new line or cobble.
You're the same as me, only better. Don't tell yourself.
Okay, I'm timing.
You're the same as me, only better. Don't tell yourself.
You'll also use this breakdown to find miscellaneous character reactions that you can use to play off otherwise unrelated moments in order to create energy, interest, and humor. For example, here, the shot of Po training his kung fu students is taken from one section of the film. But he has a line in a completely different part of the movie where he says, "Nobody said this was going to be easy." We can combine the kung fu scene with Po's line to create an entirely new packaged moment for the trailer. Check it out.
Nobody said this was gonna be easy.
You'll also use it to find individual words or even fragments of words that can be used to cheat new phrases or words that don't even exist. For example, you might want a character like Agent 47 to pluralize the word assassin.
Assassin.
By adding an S, which you'll need to search for using the character's name and the letter S.
Cachavantes.
Here's a good S sound.
Cachavantes.
You could add the S to the word
Assassins. Assassins.
and now you've got a plural,
Assassins.
which you might need to craft a particular version of the story in your trailer. So once you've got your entire film, I mean every single line by every single character, typed up and organized in your bin or folder, you'll also want to go through and color code, label, or mark your very favorite lines. That means the lines that are the most useful, interesting, funny, or emotionally charged. I like to mark my favorite lines green, like these, and other potentially useful lines yellow. Of course, you can customize this process however you like, but the important thing is to have a process and stick to it. So now that you've got your dialogue broken down, you'll want to break down your visuals as well. Unlike the dialogue, we're not going to break down and label every single shot, just your favorites. Now, exactly how you choose to mark and organize these shots is a matter of personal preference. Some editors prefer to create a number of sequences, labeled according to the type of shots they contain. Then, go through the feature cutting wide scope shots into the scope sequence, interesting accent shots into the accent sequence, and good character shots into the character sequence, which you'll probably want to arrange in your sequence by character, and a number of other sequences that are appropriate and relevant to the content in your particular film. Some editors prefer to take a faster approach and just use markers or locators to tag their favorite shots in their feature. Then they just bounce between them quickly when they're looking for a good shot to use. This isn't quite as detailed and organized, but if you have a short film, it's probably all you need. Or if you're on a tight deadline to cut a trailer quickly, it might be your only option. Generally though, it's best to break down all the different types of shots into different sequences so you can access them quickly according to the category they fall into as you're piecing together the trailer. Now, the exact movie you're working with is going to dictate which specific categories you'll be using to organize your shots. You can think of these shot categories a bit like a painter's palette, which you'll use to fill in the trailer. With pretty much every movie, you'll want to mark shots of the following types. Scope shots, which basically means wide shots, landscapes, cities, skies, and the like. ID shots, which are powerful shots of your main characters. Accents, which are any movements or interesting actions that can be placed on a musical beat or audio accent in the piece. Examples include eyebrow raises, slamming hands on a table, opening or closing a door, throwing a knife, turning a head, and so on. Now, with specific trailer genres, you'll also add additional categories of shots to your breakdown sequences. In a comedy, you might have another sequence of reaction shots from characters and funny physical gags. Whereas in an action movie, you'll want to break down your visuals by specific types of action, like guns, fights, chases, and so on. The categories you use to organize your visuals should always be specifically tailored to the shots and moments that your film has to offer. As I said before, cutting a trailer is about combining these lines, shots, and moments from multiple areas of the film in the most interesting way possible. You need to be able to access everything quickly, based on how it'll be used in your trailer, not based on where it occurs chronologically in the movie. Something very important you should remember is that 9 times out of 10, you'll get the idea for exactly how to position and structure your trailer as you're creating the breakdown. It's actually a very meditative process where your focus is 100% on the film, so good ideas are very likely to come to you at that point. Coming up in the next lesson, we're going to take a step back and look at the big picture of planning a trailer. How should we position the movie? That is, what is the main concept? What is the main tone? And who is this movie for? Alright, I'll see you in a bit. Deciding how to position a movie is crucial. Your positioning will determine a great deal about how your trailer should be cut, and how your overall marketing will be targeted. But what is positioning? The positioning of a film is the result of answering the following 2 questions. 1. What is this movie about? And 2. Who is this movie for? Or put another way, positioning can be described as the following. Concept plus tone. Let's unpack both of these terms a bit further. Concept refers to the basic story that you're telling. What's the big idea of the movie? In the world of writing and storytelling, it can also be thought of as the logline. So, in the case of the movie Elf, it's a movie about a human elf who doesn't fit in at the North Pole, ends up in New York City and comedy ensues. Now, a key point here is that we're keeping the concept simple, and it's that simple concept that your trailer should seek to own. You don't want to confuse people with too many characters, multiple love interests, complicated side plots, and so on. Determine what's unique and special about your film and focus on etching that into people's minds. For example, in the movie Wanted, the most memorable and unique part of the film is probably the bullet curving technique used by the assassins. If someone watches the trailer for Wanted and remembers nothing but the cool bullet curving technique, you've given them something memorable to walk away with. When it comes time to decide which movie to see or what to talk about with their friends, it's easy for them to say, "Oh yeah, Wanted. That's that cool assassin movie where they curve bullets." People like to assign labels and categories to things. So the easier you can make that for them to do, the more likely it is that they'll remember your trailer, talk about your movie, and ultimately watch it. The other half of positioning is tone. How are you going to present this concept editorially? What is the cutting style going to be? Who is the demographic? Older men? Middle-aged women? Young children? What genre are you working in? And even within that genre, where does your movie fall? Let's take a comedy, such as this aggressive comedy targeting the young male demographic, requiring fast-paced music and flashy style.
Oh no, it's the cops! You sick Stop!
Or is it a subtler comedy, targeting middle-aged men and women, requiring calmer music and a cleaner editorial style, like this?
I would enjoy our last few months together, but while killing you.
Once you've figured out your concept and your tone, use that knowledge to design a trailer that stays true to the DNA of the film and amplifies its best moments with some great editorial style. So in this lesson, we talked all about the positioning of a trailer and a movie. We learned that the positioning of a movie is figuring out the concept plus the tone. We talked about keeping the concept simple and unique to help your audience easily understand and mentally categorize what your movie is about. And we talked about how the tone will dictate the style of your trailer with regard to editorial techniques and music choices. Coming up in the next lesson, we'll dig a little bit deeper into the storytelling side of a trailer, and we'll discuss some of the key ingredients and the biggest pitfalls to avoid. All right, I'll see you in a bit. In the last lesson, we talked about how to position a movie using a trailer. We touched a bit on the need to distill the movie down to its basic premise and figure out what makes it unique compared to all the other films out there. In this lesson, we're going to take a deeper look at exactly how to tell this story, with suggestions and best practices for what to leave in and for what to leave out. As a general rule, the goal is to simplify, simplify, simplify. Tell the most digestible and simplified story possible, while leaving plenty of room for stylistic editing, set-piece moments, emotional builds, and satisfying montages. Let's start with what story bits to include in the trailer. Like we said in the positioning lesson, you'll want to clearly and succinctly tell your audience what the movie is essentially about. This is the main concept, or logline. Let your audience know the unique hook in this film. Is it the movie about the mouse chef that can cook French food? Is it the movie about the group of friends who has a crazy bachelor party in Las Vegas? Is it that movie we talked about where assassins can curve bullets? You get the point. If you can tell the story of a film using the character's own words, great. That's ideal. However, sometimes it's not actually possible to do that. Or the way the lines are delivered is too complicated or long-winded. That's where you can use graphic cards and narration to do some of the heavy lifting and summarize key points of the film quickly and efficiently. We'll talk more about graphics and narration in a later lesson. Last, you'll obviously want to include main character introductions. using an impactful or interesting scene or two. Chronologically, this is almost always the very first thing that will need to happen in a trailer. If you've got an action movie, introduce your characters or your character by having them do something exciting and attention-grabbing that lets us know a little bit about who they are, what they do, and their personality. The sooner your audience cares a bit about your characters, the sooner they'll be on board for the ride and invested in the rest of the trailer, interested in what happens next. Failure to accomplish this early on runs the risk of the entire trailer falling flat. Even in cases of franchises and sequels like Fast 5, roughly the first 50 seconds of the trailer are spent introducing the characters played by Vin Diesel, Paul Walker, and Dwayne Johnson. And it's done while telling us a bit of story and entertaining us with a heist, a rooftop pursuit, and a car chase. Efficient and engaging, exactly what you want. Now for the longer list, what to leave out. First, ditch unimportant character names. Typically, those types of specific details don't matter. Using names of all the characters will only confuse people and leave them muddled with unimportant information. They should be focusing on the basic story, the unique takeaway, and the overall style, not the names of random characters. For example, if you were cutting a trailer for The Hobbit 3, feel free to introduce Bilbo, Gandalf, and Sauron by name. But you might give some thought to whether it's really worth the time to have somebody say, Gloin, we've only got one chance at this, rather than, we've only got one chance at this. It seems subtle, but it's something to keep in mind as you look to simplify things as much as possible. Second, don't have a character explain a story in 10 words if they can do it in 5. 2 ways to help your characters tell the story more succinctly, if they don't naturally do so in the film, are 1. Cobble new lines. Use your dialogue breakdown to find fragments of lines that can be combined, or cobbled, to tell the story in the simplest way possible. And 2. You can record ADR, or loop lines, from actors and sound-alikes that say the exact lines that you need, and cheat them into the character's mouth with some editing trickery. We'll talk more about this later in the course. And the last thing to exclude from a trailer is the proverbial Pandora's box. Most people have heard the myth of Pandora's box, which, when opened, would unleash all the world's troubles. A dramatic example, I know. But this can happen in a trailer too. There are some story beats that will only end up raising new questions in the mind of the audience. Questions which are either confusing, uninteresting, or require too much time to explain. I'm going to leave this tip a bit vague, but just be aware that these lines exist and always consider whether a line or story point causes more trouble than it's worth. You never want to overcomplicate the trailer and confuse the viewer. So, in this lesson, we learned how to simplify the story in a trailer to leave room for style, humor, action, and emotion. We talked about conveying the main concept of the film with its unique hook, and introducing the main characters early in an interesting and engaging way. We also discussed a few things to exclude from the story told in your trailer, including character names, unnecessarily long story explanations, and Pandora's box lines. Remember, the goal of a trailer is to only show the best moments, so be careful not to make it longer than it needs to be to excite your audience. Do not fall in love with every shot and scene in the film. Be ruthless with what to cut and leave out. You're going for a simple, digestible, and unique story that the viewer can walk away with and think, I know what this movie's about, and it looks good. Coming up in the next lesson, we'll look at how to arrange the structure of a trailer before you start cutting, so you can start piecing together the best moments of a film into a logical and constantly building presentation. Alright, I'll see you in a bit. So, in the past 2 lessons, we've talked a bit about positioning and storytelling. Now, we're going to talk about the structure of the trailer and exactly how to start putting all these pieces together efficiently, staying true to the concept and tone we've decided on. Let's start by taking a quick look at some of the basic structures you'll be working with, depending on the type and length of the piece that you're cutting. Most full-length 2-minute and 30-second trailers will follow a basic 3-act structure. Act 1 sets up the characters in the world. Act 2 presents the conflict and the plot complications. And Act 3 escalates everything and allows us to jump around the movie with big music and montages. Teaser trailers will typically only have 1 or 2 acts. In a teaser, you're trying to set the mood and the tone, give the central theme of the movie, and leave the viewer with one memorable moment. Finally, a shorter promo or 30-second spot will still actually have 2 or 3 acts. They're just very, very condensed. More on that later. Alright, now that we have a basic idea of the layout in each type of trailer or promo, let's take a more detailed look at exactly how the information, music, and moments can be arranged. When paper cutting and structuring out your own trailer, you're going to lean very heavily on your dialogue and visual breakdowns. If you haven't already, you'll want to read back through your entire dialogue breakdown and mark, color, or favorite all of the lines that explain the story, display powerful emotion, and add humor. Also, always be on the lookout for long, descriptive speeches by a character, as they can serve as wonderful grids around which to cut a significant portion of the piece. Here's a great one from X-Men Apocalypse.
Forget everything you think you know. None of that matters. You're not students anymore.
I'll take everything from them.
You're X-Men.
You'll also want to refresh your memory as to the coolest, funniest, and most emotional visual moments in your film by scanning back through your visual breakdown. And something else to remember as you're looking through your dialogue and visuals. Don't be afraid to decontextualize the lines and the moments. That means, just because a character says, "This is going to be insane," in the middle of the film, in reference to a concert he's going to with friends, you can use that line at the beginning of your trailer to kick things off. In a trailer, every moment of a film is at your disposal and can freely be taken out of its original context in order to best serve the theme and the story. Okay, so once you've got a list of favorite lines and a good idea of your most important moments, you're ready to start paper cutting the structure of your trailer. This process is pretty straightforward. I like to open up a Word or a text document and type my favorite lines, along with the character that said them, into the document. Then I'll just start rearranging them, combining them, and deleting them until I've come up with a good way to tell the story, explain the conflict, and to get to all the best moments in the film. At the same time, you're going to want to be thinking about these key moments in the film and where they might occur throughout the piece. Make a note of their potential placement in between the various dialogue lines. As you are arranging all the lines and key moments into a cohesive story, keep in mind the 3-act structure. You might actually want to make some sort of note on your paper cut where each act begins and ends. This will help keep you on track with delivering the right information at the right time of the trailer. Remember, Act 1 is character and world introduction. Act 2 is conflict and story development, and Act 3 is the wild ride, containing much less in the way of dialogue and focused more on visuals and music. The demarcation of acts in your paper cut will also serve as good indicators as to where you'll likely need to change your music into something more appropriate for the next phase of your trailer. Once you've got a paper cut in your hands, you've got a roadmap to the structure of your trailer, and the editing process will be a lot less stressful and more efficient. When you're arranging your trailer structure, here are a couple tips to help you out. It's a good idea to start by figuring out your first moment in the trailer and your last moment in the trailer. That is, how are you going to open it and how are you going to close it? As we mentioned in the last lesson about story, your opening moment should introduce your characters and begin to set up your world in an interesting and engaging way. For your end moment, you'll want to end your trailer on the best moment your film has to offer. The last 30 seconds or so should be the most memorable part of your trailer. Don't lose sight of that, because it's likely the only moment that people will specifically remember. In a comedy, that means your funniest joke. With action, it means the biggest spectacle. And with horror, it's the biggest scare. And with drama, it's the most emotionally charged moment or line. Now, a couple quick notes here about the final moment of your trailer. First, you can use your biggest and best moment right before the main title, or you can use a slightly smaller moment right before the main title and save the biggest and best for the button. If you remember, the button is the part of the trailer that happens at the very end right after the main title, but before the billing cards. Check out this example of a button from Trailer 2 of Captain America: Civil War.
All right, I've run out of patience. On to roost!
Hey, everyone.
Once you've got your introduction and your big final moment figured out, you'll plan out the middle of the trailer last. Figure out what needs to happen with the story and moments in the rest of the piece to tie the open and close together. One last tip as you're paper cutting your trailer. If you find that you're unable to effectively tell the story, or it's just taking up too much time in your piece, remember that you can add voiceover, graphic cards, or even newly recorded character lines from sound-alikes, or the actual characters from the film if you can get a hold of them. This is the stage where you'll want to be solving those problems. Later on, once you start cutting all these lines and moments onto your timeline and marrying them with visuals, you might find that some areas need a bit more explanation and others can do with a bit less. That's okay, you can adjust things more at that point. So in this lesson, we learned all about trailer structure. We talked about the basic formats of a trailer versus a teaser versus a TV spot. We deconstructed the anatomy of a trailer, and we looked at how all the pieces fit together and flowed from one to the next. And we talked about how to paper cut your own trailer structure. Coming up in the next lesson, we're going to dive into a number of essential trailer editing techniques, beginning with the most important, choosing your music. All right, I'll see you in a bit.